This is Joshua Hart here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by Adam Smith here over Zoom today. Adam, it's a quieter week in the boxing landscape, but you're coming off the back of a very busy week with GBM, the final show of 2024. I think about this time last week now. First of all, though, how is everything, mate? You all good?
Yeah, good, Joshua. It's never a quiet week in the boxing world, and yeah, we're sort of, I guess, sandwiched in between the GBM show last week and the big one in Riyadh next weekend. But there's so much action before that. There's the Monaco show tomorrow night. I spoke to Eddie yesterday. There's the Dillian White event in Gibraltar on Sunday, which I'm going over for, and then it's off to Saudi for reignited for Usyk Fury 2, which is obviously a mouth-watering a way to finish 2024. So yeah, it's non-stop really until Christmas. That's how we like it. And yeah, it was a great show looking back at the GBM year. I think it's been a fantastic breakthrough year for Izzy. I think it's one that's seen the shows go from strength to strength with more publicity, fighters developing beautifully, some really great moments throughout the year, taking in a lot of the UK, which is great. The trip down to London was fantastic, to York Hall, a couple in the Midlands, that wonderful sort of long card in Rotherham too. There's been some great stuff, a lot of sort of 50-50 or 55-45 fights. And I think Izzy and Mitch have done brilliantly this year in 2024. And TalkSport helped us out so much in the first part of the year, and then of course the DAZN deal came, and yeah, it looks like it's set for a huge 2025. I thought the show last Saturday was excellent, and we were unlucky with the main event. Not as unlucky as fans as the two fighters were. Rarely seen sort of a double collision like that. And when I saw the blood coming out of Jack, it was crazy. You don't often see something gushing as badly as that. And I was in the ring afterwards with a pair of them. The canvas was just sodden. And so, look, the only thing that could have happened did happen. And the doctors, I think there were two doctors in there, but they rightfully called it off. And it was gutting for both guys. You know, they've worked so long and hard for that moment, and to have it curtailed after what 4 or 5 minutes is such a shame. But they go again. We'll patch them up, and we'll do it again in 2025, and we'll do the Ashfaq Giles fight again, which was an absolute corker. It was a great fight. I thought Kez boxed possibly the best he's boxed as a pro. Levi was at him from the very first moment. It was a great clash of styles, and yeah, we'll definitely do that. Two draws. I mean, you can't predict something like that to happen, but maybe it shows us how close the matches are as well, and that's what we try and do at GBM. I thought others booked well on the night. Kieran Malloy did everything right. He now needs to step up, I think, in 2025. I'd love to go to Galway with him and experience the Irish fans, his faithful over there. Adnan Amar was good. Who else we had? Muhammad Ali boxed, I thought, really well. Niall Berry was good. I like the way his maturity of dealing with the situation with Razor Ali off and excuse me, having to go through it and box. It was a tough fight, and he did really well. So Niall did good. It was just a great night. Taz Nadeem again learned a little bit more. You can't just blast everyone out, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I think the star of the show for me was Ed Hardy. Not only was it a great performance under the watchfly of Sonny Edwards, who I loved working alongside with Nick Peet and Dave Caldwell. Sonny's a great character, obviously, and now he's going to spend more time on our side of the ropes. Brilliant working with him, and of course he sort of helps look after Ed Hardy, and Ed's become a real favourite over the last few months. He's got the terrific farm in Doncaster. He's a great guy, and I thought it was a standout performance from him. So yeah, all in all, a really good night in Sheffield. And yeah, we the boxing world turns, and on we go.
What was that emotion like? Obviously, you put this big card together, and then obviously not only with the struggle of losing Razor Ali versus Niall Berry, which in my opinion, sitting at that press conference on the day, I thought that was going to be an absolute barnstorm. That was going to be fight of the night. I think Izzy said it himself. So not only losing that, but then having the top two fights finish in draws. It's very rare that you see your two main events, I guess you could say, your main and chief support, both finishing draws. What was that emotion like for yourself and Izzy after the card was done?
I think we love the show as we love every show, but we can always learn from them. I always say you have to look back, and you're only as good as your last show. And obviously, the main event wasn't great, so yeah, you're a bit disappointed. It's a gutting way, more for the fighters than anyone. I thought the fans were great. You know, they were cheering at the end, and they go back to Leamington and Leeds. It's a little bit of a pain. There was no definitive conclusion, but it was a great night of boxing. So I always think you look at the whole card, and it was entertaining all the way through. There were good fights, there were stories, there was some really tasty action, particularly Ashfaq and Giles. So yeah, and it was, remember, it's the last show of the year, and it's been a long, hard, tiring year for all of us, and it's hard at trying to get. They've had 3 years, I think, of GBM. It's been amazing the way that they've come to the forefront, really. Of course, still trying to get onto that level of a Matchroom, a Queensbury, a Boxer. Of course, not there yet, but the acceleration has been vast, and the team's great, young, diverse, cool, creative group of people, and we're adding to that, and we're always coming up with ideas and thinking about it. I think that the social output's fantastic, the reels are brilliant. You really feel it's happening, and the production is always first class, as well as the cards. And yeah, of course, they're not the biggest names. They're good domestic names. They're not the sort of world renowned fighters that maybe some of the other promoters have at the moment. But there's no reason why Izzy, I don't think, can take his place at the table alongside some of those promoters on a Riyadh season card at some stage in 25. And we're just keeping our own lane and putting on great shows. The fans keep coming. The fighters want to be part of GBM, and DAZN are happy. And that's the most important thing. DAZN seems to be gathering everyone under their umbrella. And, it's important to be like that. So with us, Matchroom, obviously, now Queensbury are on the way in the spring, and GBM will sit alongside two powerhouses. And that's a chance for everybody to learn off it. I said to Izzy that the two things really for 2025 that I'd like to see is that collaboration with Matchroom and Queensbury, like Eddie and Frank have done. Maybe at a slightly lower level, but helping each other out, and maybe utilizing some of Matchroom's vast stable, or Queensbury's, and maybe swapping and making matches between the sort of, I guess, the younger parts of the stables, not maybe the more established names who are heading to Saudi. But the other thing is that we need to get a fighter or two in underneath Turkey Al Sheikh's nose. Whether it's a Kieran Malloy, a Shaq Thompson, a Tyson Gallagher, who knows who it is yet? Shakan Peters, who we've just signed. There's loads of possibilities there. Dante Dixon was a signing on the night as well. We announced that, and I think he's one of the most talented fighters I've seen come out of Sheffield and England in a long time. But it's up to his dedication whether he wants to do it, because he's not taking it seriously enough. So it's just about, there's a long way to go, but I think we've gone a long way in a very short space of time, if you see what I mean. So I think that GBM is really established. I think people like what we're about. They like Izzy. He's an infectious character. He's great at the press conferences, and fighters are getting work, and I think that's really important. Good shows in Britain. Matchroom, Eddie tells me they're doing many more shows next year. Box Nation obviously have got a lot. I think it's going to be very, very busy domestic calendar in 2025, and the big shows still happening in Saudi, and I think Riyadh season will go around as well again. So I think 2025 is going to be a monster year for boxing, and I'm just pleased that GBM has a part to play in it, and I think quite a good part to play for DAZN and for British boxing. So yeah, it's I think we look back at it and think, yeah, it was a really good show again. Shame about the main event. These things happen in boxing. You can't guarantee something. You can match them, but ultimately the two stars might clash. They might gel brilliantly. You don't really know until that bell goes, which is the mystery and the unpredictability of boxing. But it's fantastic that we've got these cards out. We've had an opportunity, and I think Izzy and Mitch have worked really hard with their great team. And yeah, it's nice to play a little part of it.
You mentioned obviously heading into 2025, obviously Matchroom are going to have a busier year in the UK. We've got Queensbury also coming to the zone in 2025 in April. Do you feel with this move of Queensbury to the zone and seeing so many more, we're seeing talks of Top Rank possibly being on their way to the zone as well now. Do you feel with all these promoters all coming together and really solidifying the zone as the home of boxing, it's going to make it so much easier to see these cross promotion fights, especially in earlier days where, we saw how hard it was to try and make Joshua versus Wilder, which never happened. We've seen how much of a struggle it's been to make Fury versus Joshua, which we're hoping happens in 2025. Do you feel seeing everyone under the same broadcaster is going to make it a lot easier but to see these fantasy fights and see more Queensbury versus Matchroom, Queensbury versus GBM, because GBM are in that mix now as well. Do you feel this opens a lot more opportunity for the sport?
Absolutely. Yeah, GBM are in the right place, and I think DAZN have put their marker down as they want to be the home of combat sports. Mike Ridout, who was brought on to do that, I think, and bring everything together as much as possible. You're seeing Frank Stable joining with Eddie. You're seeing Eddie and Frank's collaboration out in Saudi. Turkey Al Sheikhs has brought everyone together, and Turkey's done an amazing job with this team of getting that done, which seemed an impossibility. So obviously, more matches, more fights are being made. Egos are sort of put aside, and money's coming in, and the fights are being guaranteed. Turkey's made no secret of the fact that DAZN are the channel that he wants, he loves. Obviously, Sky's very important to him because the biggest British broadcaster of sport with the width of it. Vital that Sky continues in boxing. They've got the deal with Ben Shalom. They've got Tasha Jonas, my friend, on tomorrow night, and big plans for, I'm sure, for 2025. So it's important, and Channel 5 as well with Wasserman. I look after Sophie Alish, and that's she's got her stable over there, which was on a Harlem Eubank build recently. So I think it is important that that there is competition always. When I was at Sky, it was almost like we were the home of boxing, and we were the ones that year in, year out, guaranteed to provide boxing coverage. And BBC were there for a bit, then ITV were there for many years. But things sort of fell away, and ITV Digital came in, Tanta came in, Box Nation came in, and then it's been revived of late. But yeah, I think we felt at Sky that we were the home for so many years, and there wasn't really the competition. Then BT comes along, Frank sort of evolves again, George comes into it, and yeah, competition is very healthy. But competition within an umbrella is also going to be good. As you say, the 5v5s in any sort of format in different ways, the Golden Boys, as you said, if Top Rank join or others, it will be very interesting to see. So I think there's huge opportunities that come with it. But I would also like to see the fact Sky are majorly in boxing, Channel 5 are still as well, because I think even everyone at DAZN would say we want to see competition because it keeps everybody on their toes and it's good for fight fans. But then there's the argument that if fight fans just have one place to go to, then they know where that venue is. And I think that's important. It certainly felt like that at Sky several years ago, that was the place to go. Then Eddie leaves for DAZN, or Frank has rebuilt on BT, becoming TNT, and suddenly you look at Saudi now, you've got Sky box office, TNT box office, and of course DAZN, the host broadcaster, and the leader on the night. But it's a choice for customers, isn't it? And I think with everything sort of seemingly going towards DAZN, or a great deal of it, I think it's going to be fantastic for matches, fantastic for fighters, great for fans to sort of know where to go, where their destination is. And DAZN becomes the home, not just for boxing, but for combat sports in general, because of UFC, PFL, bare knuckle, everything else that is attached to DAZN. So they're the streaming specialists for boxing. That's obvious. If you've got Eddie and Frank there by the spring of next year, that's big. But of course, Ben on Sky and Calla and Issa on Channel 5, and other, there's Talk Sport, and there's Fight Zone, and other streamers and platforms, different ones, of course. I also look after Carl Davis, who at the moment, he's been on Fight Zone, and we're looking where to go with him. He's a 9-0 fighter. But if you know that, okay, there's a number of different broadcasters who are going to be, promoters who are going to be on DAZN, on a broadcaster or on a streaming platform, you know that that's probably the way you head with your fighter as well. So it's interesting times. But for me, I've got one that's on Channel 5, one that's on a small hall, and I've got GBM that's on the zone. So and I've got my old friends at Sky. So I'm a bit sort of jumbled with it at the minute still. But I think, yeah, in answer to your question, I think it can only be good for fighters and fans, like Turkey has done in Saudi and globally, if DAZN becomes a must go to destination for boxing week in, week out.
Just my last one on GBM and everything. This is just one that's just popped into my head randomly as you've been talking there. But obviously, we've seen the rise of GBM, and another, I guess you could say, small hall promoter who's making that growth is Top Tier. We've seen what they've been doing. We've seen they've just had their first title fight. Let's say that make this next year, but give it a few more years. Could we see a potential 5v5 domestically between GBM and Top Tier? Could that ever be an idea?
Of course it is. Top Tier have done brilliantly. They're fantastic. It's great to see, and they're also, with being in Essex, they're close to Manchester and they're close in geography to Queensbury too. So and it's brilliant that they're putting on these same sort of fights. So yeah, Top Tier and Jamie Conlon. You've still got around the Steve Wood, Goodwin, lots of different promoters up and down the country. Carl Greaves I saw the other night. These are John Pegg. These are the managers, promoters that put on fight weeks all the time with sometimes with no TV or very little money, and they're the bread and butter of the brigade. That's what has always made British boxing. They're the unsung heroes. But yeah, I mean certainly from a GBM point of view, if we see Top Tier and others on, of course there are. But I know how Izzy would answer that question. He said, right, let's have 5v5 Matchroom or 5v5 Queensbury, because that's how Izzy sees himself. He sees himself as with a number three then after Matchroom and Queensbury. And I said, yeah, that's true. But if you look at the fighters that we've got, they've still got to head on to Riyadh season. They've got to win those serious titles and build the records up rather than 9, 10, 11 and 0 to your 17, 18, 19 and 0, or not necessarily even unbeaten, but just at that level to be able to compete with anyone across the board. We're not quite there yet, and that's the honest truth. But we're moving in the right direction, GBM, and it's great to see. But Queensbury have had a fantastic year. They've got a whole heap of fighters now, especially in the heavyweight division. Matchroom continue to be incredibly strong, particularly globally. And Boxer have got some fantastic talent, the likes of Adam Azine, Caroline Dubois, and all the fighters, for example, who are on tomorrow night in Liverpool. It's great. Callum Simpson, another one I'm very close to, who's doing brilliantly. It's wonderful to see British boxing and global boxing in such a great place, and it does come down to what's happened in Saudi and the landscape changing, and I think it's given fighters more belief that they can make real money out of this sport, that it's not just domestic. Maybe their ambitions are not just on a British title anymore or a Lonsdale belt, but they're on, okay, I could be 3, 4 wins away from being on the big stage here, particularly if you're a heavyweight. Look at Johnny Fisher. He's come from a university graduate, a history student who was a rugby player, to fighting on the big stage, undercard of Usyk Fury. I mean, it's pinch yourself stuff. And I think for Johnny, it still is. And he's like, let's see how far this can take us. He doesn't know. What's he? He's a wet night in Stoke. That's what Johnny Fisher. He keeps his feet on the ground, and he's giving it a right old go. And I think it's absolutely wonderful to see. And he may not be in the class with some of the others, but he's going to be there or thereabouts, and he's going to be in some fantastic fights. And probably more importantly for the family, he's going to make a huge amount of money because he's got a big fan base. He's got a story. He's got a crazy dad, and there's something to love about it. And when you've got a story that people relate to, you're halfway there. So yeah, it's things like that just are becoming great to see. Even Liam Cameron, having gone through what he's gone through out of the ring to find himself on a Riyadh card and giving Ben Whittaker, everything that he could handle. It's fantastic to see Ishmael Davis taking, this opportunity at just a couple of weeks' notice. He was in Sheffield the other night, and suddenly, he's fighting on the biggest night of the year. It's great. It's really great for the fighters, and that's the most important thing. That they earn well out of it, and they get those opportunities.
Well, so you've mentioned a couple of the fighters on the Usyk Fury 2 undercard next week. Let's turn our attention to that now. Uh, it's in doubt it's the biggest night of boxing in the year. We saw the 12 rounds they shared back in May, and nearly everyone's eyes in the world was on that fight, and it's going to happen again next Saturday. Um, we'll go straight into it. What's your gut telling you? What do you think is going to happen next Saturday in Riyadh?
I think it's going to be another terrific fight. Everyone I speak to believes it's going to be close again. I would say, if you gauge opinion, probably 60% think Usyk and 40% think Fury. Fury can win it. Usyk should win it, is probably the way of looking at it. He won it first time around, Oleksandr, and I've been out in Gandia in his training camp, and he looks as professional and as phenomenal as ever. Just an absolute pleasure to be around him. Meanwhile, tried very hard to get to Malta on several occasions, and they've closed the camp off. And I think that he's done the right thing, Tyson. He's taken this extremely seriously. He knows that he lost the first fight when he looks at himself in the mirror, and he knows he's got to try and right that wrong. He's very good in rematches. He's great when his back's up against the wall. We know how he's come back, the extraordinary story of Tyson Fury. So you could never, ever count him out. And he's got the size and the reach and all the advantages that he didn't quite use well enough or sustain well enough through the first fight. Certainly rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7, he was terrific. So there's real hope then, if you're in the Fury camp, that he can turn that into something more concrete. But for Usyk, he's developed into a really strong heavyweight, even though he's a smaller guy. And his IQ is exceptional, and he trains unbelievably hard. The dedication is just like something I've never seen before from maybe a fighter of that magnitude. It's unbelievable what he puts his body through, and all the sort of amazing results and the tests, and there's scientists in the camp, and it just he's a one-off. Okay, Lomachenko and others at different weights, Mayweather's, etc. But as a cruiserweight to a heavyweight, a man that's got that sort of speed and balance, and he's a southpaw, and he had 350 amateur fights. He's going to be hard to beat. But if there's anyone that could do it, it could be Tyson, because if he goes and utilizes that weight properly and tries to, I don't know, take the fight out of Usyk, and maybe the body is the target. But I mean, it's easier said than done. He's just so good on his feet, Usyk, and he deals with a crisis well as well. He doesn't seem to panic. And when he was in a bit of trouble at the end of the 7th round, he comes round at 8 and 9. He's right back at him. 9th round probably should have been stopped. And there's a lot of people that think Usyk wins by knockout this time, mostly late. But I was speaking to somebody earlier, and they're saying, "What about Usyk early?" And I think that there is that possibility as well. I think there's any possibility in this fight. I think the majority leaning towards Usyk do it with right reason, because he won the first time around. But it should be close again, and it was a much better fight than I thought it would be stylistically the first time. So let's hope we get round 13 more of the same. That's what we want. We just want another great fight, don't we? And if
Absolutely.
Fury loses, he goes off and fights AJ. And if he wins, we get a trilogy. So it's happy days, isn't it?
I'd agree with that one. One thing I was going to say, and you kind of lead me on nicely into that with mentioning if Fury loses, we go into the AJ fight. If he wins, it's a trilogy. I've seen a few comments on social media just from general boxing fans, and a lot of them are kind of hitting at this idea now that they feel, regardless of the result next week, this could be the last time we see Fury, and a lot of them say more than likely Usyk as well. But it'll be the last time we see them in a professional boxing ring. Do you feel that we could be seeing that, or do you think they'll both return again in 2025?
No, I think they'll both fight on. Unless one of them gets dramatically knocked out and thinks, do I need this anymore? They've got more money than they need for 3, 4 generations of their kids, don't they? But it's not about money. Oleksandr Usyk loves fighting. He's not done yet. He wants to fight on. I don't think he even cares about opponents. He just loves doing it. And then when he's ready to retire, I think he's going to help the kids of the future out. I think that's his. He's very humble, Usyk. And I think Tyson also. We've seen it with him as well. Yes, he talks about the money and the cars and all the rest of it. But he puts the bins out in Morecambe, and he's seen down the the local supermarkets and all that. And I think that these two they love boxing, both of them. They were born to box. Well, certainly, I mean, Usyk might argue and say, okay, he was a footballer and he turned in his teens and whatever. And Tyson definitely was with that name. But I think they were. I think that's where they find their home. That's where they're best at. No, and I think one thing I'm thinking of a little bit is Tyson Fury's legs in this fight. Has he had a lot of wars? Has the trilogy of the Wilder situations that taken a bit out of him? The Ngannou fight, the ups and downs in weight, the living and all that. Whereas Usyk's been that sort of consummate professional. Is that going to come into play? Dillian White doesn't think so. I spoke to him the other day, and he was saying that he doesn't think it's about adapting. He said all our legs slow, but it's about adapting when you're 36, 37, 38. Like Muhammad Ali did late on, or certainly against Foreman. And but I don't know. I think that could come into the story next week, the legs. But we'll see. I personally think both will fight on. And as I said, I think if Usyk wins, I think Fury fights Joshua in a couple of fights next year, and that's how they sail out into the sunset, the pair of them. But if Fury makes it 1-1, then it'll be interesting. Will they then want the Fury Joshua fight, because Fury will have a bunch of titles, and will AJ going that way, or will they want the trilogy? I think they've sort of said they want the trilogy. And then there's Daniel Dubois, of course, and he's got a tough fight against Joseph Parker in February. And the likes of Zhilei Zhang and Avik Kabayel and Martin Bakole and Moses Atalma coming through, and you name it. And Dillian floating around back in Gibraltar on Sunday. Derek still going. There's the heavyweights. They just keep on giving, don't they? And this brigade is just ready for the next step. So yeah, I think AJ and Fury are nearing the end of their careers, as is probably Usyk, but I could see them all fighting in 2025, and maybe one or two of them in 26 too.
Interesting. Just sticking with Fury versus Usyk again. My colleague Eamon Khan spoke to Duke McKenzie the other day, to which he said he does feel that Tyson Fury's legs are completely shot and they're completely gone. Do you agree with that statement? Can you see why he thinks that?
Look, Duke's a three-time champion and a phenomenal former fighter and a great pundit. Everybody's got opinions, and he could be right. As I said, if you look at everyone's saying, "Oh, Wilder's brilliant at getting revenge," and Fury's brilliant at getting revenge. He did it against McDermott. He did it against Wilder emphatically in Vegas. That was an amazing performance, but it was a long time ago now. If you think back to that moment, and he has had the Dillian White fight, the Chisora fight. If you look at the third fight against Wilder, particularly, you look at Ngannou and you look at Usyk and the trouble he was in that ninth round. Okay, he did well to get through it. Yeah, there is an argument. And of course, it's another 6 months on. So the legs aren't going to get any quicker. I guess it's also about whether Usyk can get even better, or will he have dimmed slightly? From what I saw, no. But you only know under the lights with the little gloves. You only know when it actually happens. You can watch as much sparring or training and everyone can look good on the pads. Look at Mike Tyson looking incredible on the combinations. When it came to it, there was nothing in the body. Well, he's 58. He's not 36 and 37. So, that's a different story. That's 20 years on. I don't expect either of them just to get old overnight. I don't think that's probably going to happen. But I do think this fight will come down to fine margins. And if Tyson's legs are not quite the same, despite the severity that he's taken this camp, the serious nature where he's taken the camp, he'll feel in incredible shape. He's probably put a bit of size on too. But Usyk looks pretty big to me around the shoulders. I think they have done a lot of strength work as well as the usual conditioning and the sparring and everything. So there may be a little shock there with possibly, Usyk does not seem a big puncher as a heavyweight. However, he had Fury in a lot of trouble. Again, if he does again, why can't he knock him out this time? So it's a fascinating one. It could be that Usyk wins easily. It could be that Fury exacts revenge, and the size does come into it because, as Lennox Lewis always says, a good big guy beats a good little guy. The trouble is, Usyk's an exceptional little guy, and Tyson's a pretty good big guy. Where's, how does it work out? Well, we don't know, which is why we're all going to be tuned in or there in Riyadh next Saturday night, finding out. And that's the magic of boxing, because especially with the heavyweights, no one knows. One could have a slightly better night than the other one, and then it could all be different. But I guess we'll probably, as with all these things, you tend to, maybe apart from Danny Quarterman and Jack Bateson, you wouldn't have thought that would have happened. But with most of the ways, if fights go, long or 12 rounds, you sort of look back at it and think, yeah, probably was going to go like that. Like Bivol Beterbiev, there was nothing in it. There was nothing in it beforehand and not a lot in it on the night. Some people thought Bivol, like I did. Some people thought Beterbiev won it. So we're going to do it again. Well, we've seen Usyk Fury. Usyk won the fight, but it wasn't by 10 rounds. It was close. There were moments where Fury had control. So I'd expect both of them to have moments in this fight. And if they don't, if it's a one-sided fight, then somebody's dramatically improved or got it right, and someone's diminished, because the first fight and the second fight should be fairly similar. Bowe and Holyfield fought 3 times. Okay, Bowe won the first fight, Holyfield won the second fight, but they were similar. There was not a lot in them. Morales Barrera fought 3 times. Yes, it edged one way than the other, but when they're very well matched at elite level, it's going to be close-ish because they're the best. So I don't expect, unless one of them lands a shot. At heavyweight is where it's different. And the lighter weights, you think, okay, it will probably dance out the same. Bivol Beterbiev probably similar. This one at heavyweight, you don't know, because the bone crunching shot, especially if you've got the power of a Wilder, can change things. But I would expect it to be a long fight again. I expect it to be fairly close. I expect a similar sort of outcome, unless Fury can turn the tables. But if there was a knockout early, it wouldn't be it wouldn't be as unusual as Bateson and Quartermain. And okay, you can't compare them in levels; it's miles apart. But you get what I'm saying. No
Mm.
one would have thought before that fight that Jack and Danny would be stopped both with cuts in a terrible way in the second round. Maybe one cut, patched up, carry on, whatever. But it's rare to see 2 doctors in a ring. So you never know what happens when when a fight. I always say, when you can do all the build up until the first bell goes. Once the first bell goes, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing that the referee can do apart from try and officiate it. And nothing the coaches can do apart from try and offer a bit of advice and change the course of the direction of the fight. But it will come down to the 2 fighters. And it's sort of up to them and the way it stylistically evolves and who keeps their concentration. And the thing is, I keep leaning back to sort of Usyk's intelligence and what Belly always tells me, which is, he just makes you exhausted. He physically exhausts you with his little, tricks, his mental strength, the way he parries punches, his countering, his left that he uses, his backhand. And that keeps coming to me. But then I think, well, Tyson Fury is bedazzled, and he's also changed his tactics so many times. He's got up off the floor. So how on earth can you in any way write him off in this? Because he had that major success between 4 and 7 last time. So it's one of those that we're going to get a great rematch. I'm sure of it. And we'll see who's the man. At the moment, it's Oleksandr Usyk, pound for pound king. What he did at cruiserweight and heavyweight. If he wins this, he's got to be seen as one of the great fighters, if he's not already, one of the greatest fighters of all time in any era. Difficult to compare eras, but tell me somebody else who's Holyfield did it, I suppose, but someone who was much lighter even as an amateur to do this. And remember, he's not been beaten yet as a pro. It's quite extraordinary what he's done. Plus the fact he's a great guy and he's a family man and he loves his kids and he dotes on them and that's how he wants to live. He wears odd socks. He's a funny fella, very bright, and he's representing his country, who've had so much turmoil in the last couple of years, and it's brilliant to see. So yeah, it's like globally he's just been amazing, Usyk. But then Fury's story has been equally dramatic in its own way. And if he does this and becomes a 3-time heavyweight champion, and exact revenge, and does it somehow, wow. right? So both results will be pretty incredible for sport. Can't wait.
Absolutely. From one big heavyweight fight to another, we'll get just over 2 months on. We will get Daniel Dubois in his second defense now against Joseph Parker. A very well-deserved world title shot for Joseph Parker, in my opinion. When you sit down and look at that fight and you look at the styles, who do you give the advantage to in that fight, and who do you believe comes out on top?
Daniel's got the advantage because he's got momentum. He's fresh. He's young. He's the young lion. I had a long chat with Joe Parker the other day. He's been out of the ring. He will have been for 11 months, I think. And he was on a real roll as well. So I'm not sure that's the greatest thing. I'm surprised he didn't get another run out maybe on this bill or one of the others on Riyadh season. So that's quite surprising. But as a fight, it's a great fight. And I take my hats off to Team Dubois and Team Parker for taking it because it's another unpredictable one. It's a really good fight. You know, Joe is older, but he's not ancient. He's hit really good form again. Probably the best form of his life under Andy Lee. And George Lockhart. They've got a wonderful relationship. It's working really well. He's bulked up a little bit, so maybe he'll be a little bit more powerful too. But yeah, we've seen the way he beat Wilder and Zhang and how he's really reinvented himself. Joe Parker's a hard night's work for anyone. Again, talking to Dillian, it's like that's a tough fight for Daniel Dubois because he's a really skilled boxer, Parker. But Dubois is has been a massive breath of fresh air, and look where he's come as well from adversity. Both of them have had their difficulties, but Dubois has come through recently, and he will just be brimming with confidence, especially after the wins against Hrgovic and Joshua alongside Don Charles. You know, he's the younger guy at 27. Frank Warren's fighter, both of them, but Frank obviously is sort of sees Dubois as the future kingpin. So likely he favours Daniel in the fight, but it's not a soft. What is it? Second defence, his IBF title. He got sort of given to him, didn't he? Should have probably won it against Hrgovic. You all think of the Joshua fight as is the way he won the title, but no, that was a defence. So this is his second defence against Joseph Parker. We'd have all forgiven him for having a soft touch or a much more lowly ranked heavyweight in the other corner, especially on the best card I think I've ever seen in boxing, or certainly for 2 decades, 3 decades maybe. And there they are, the pair of them, underneath Bivol Bataeviev, in a great fight. It's fantastic. Can't wait for it. So yeah, I mean the momentum and the youth is with Daniel, but the momentum was with Joe. He's had a few months off. He says it's just improved him because it's brought him closer to George and to Andy, and they're really excited about the camp. He believes fully that he's going to become world heavyweight champion for the second time all over again. He says he's more mature. He says he's doing it for himself. He doesn't need to do it. And I like that in a fighter. He's a very hungry fighter, Joe Parker. So Daniel's got to be really on the ball. But I like Daniel. He's very good. He's got a wonderful jab. He's a Don Charles says he's the best two-handed fighter in the heavyweight division. And he is. He's a real handful. But you do look at, okay, Joyce, the eye was a massive problem, obviously. And Dubois, he felt unlucky with the low blow. He felt that he was hard done by, and then he got stopped. But you could look at it and say, okay, there's two defeats there, and and you look at Joe's defeats, and it's a good match, isn't it? It's not a good match; it's a great match. And I talked to both of them beforehand, and they were saying, oh, both camps were saying, who do you think now? I said, I think to Dubois' team, I was saying, I think Joe Parker's the best fight for you. And then Joe was like, what do you I was like, I think you should fight Daniel Dubois next. And it's great when something happens that you really want to happen. So yeah, as a fan, I can't wait for it. I think it's brilliant. I think it's going to tell us a lot about Daniel Dubois, but I think it's also going to tell us a lot about Joe Parker. And I think like you saw AJ and Ben Davidson and their reinvention, and you've seen after Shane McGuigan's great work with Daniel, you've seen Don Charles come in and give him a lot of confidence and a lot of help with his defense and mentality, all of that. Don's really worked hard on that. But Andy Lee and Joe Parker have been a brilliant fusion. I thought when they fought Wilder, they were just terrific. They were in tune. it was like a symphony watching the two of them in the corner and out, executing the tactics. It was fantastic. So I think he's finally found his home, Joe. We all love him. He's one of the nicest guys in boxing. He deserves the opportunity. But I think Daniel deserves the credit because for me, he didn't get enough credit after Joshua. It was more, what should AJ do now? Should he retire? What's happened to AJ? Why did he get beaten like that? Whereas, in my opinion, it should have been a lot more. Daniel Dubois, ruthless performance, fantastic coming of age fight in front of 96,000 people at Wembley. Hats off to the young lion, the new king of British and world boxing. Okay, so let's see this guy who's taking the tough fights. He doesn't care who he fights, Daniel. Trust me on that. And he's taken a tough challenge, which is great to see. So I think he's going to bring the best out in both fighters. I think it's going to be really good.
And then just lastly, my last one now. We've seen obviously the rivalry reignite with Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. We know Conor Benn is now clear to fight completely. There is not one thing holding him back now. And again, listening to various interviews, we've seen IFL do one, both with Eddie Hearn and Chris Eubank Jr.'s manager at the same time. Again, my colleague Eamon, he spoke to Ben Shalom yesterday, in which he said he's done everything he can to make this fight now, and it is fully in Matchroom's court, but we just can't quite seem to get to a deal. They're not agreeing on the 50-50. Do you believe that we are now really starting to get to a point where if this fight isn't finalized soon, we're going to lose it for good and they'll just go down their separate paths?
I don't think we'll lose it for good. No, I mean, we haven't lost Fury Joshua for good. There's always time to resurrect fights. We saw Khan Brook in the end. Yeah, some fights don't happen. Mayweather Pacquiao was too late. Could have had a trilogy by the time it actually happened. Eubank Benn could have happened. It didn't. We get a chance again. This is the time, surely, with Turkey and the Saudi money and everyone involved and people working together much more. And it's obvious it's the big fight out there, certainly for the casual fans too. It's got everything and all the ingredients. It's a bit like I'm a Liverpool fan, right? Mo Salah's playing possibly the best he's ever played. He's the gift that just keeps on giving. He's absolutely incredible. And of course, they're sort of wrangling over a contract. And it's like, as Daniel Sturridge said, show me the money, right? Pay him whatever he wants. I don't think even for Mo's salary, it's even about money. I think it's about pride and principle. It's about, probably how much, Liverpool want him and the 2-3 year thing, whatever. But just get it done. Okay? Eubank Benn, there's a lot of money involved and a lot of egos. Okay? So all it needs is a couple of sensible people behind the scenes just to pull the strings and get it done. Right? Now's the time. 2025 is the time to get this fight made. So I don't see why it can't be. And all this stuff of 55, 45, you're lucky getting this and all this sort of, it's all part of the fun and games as we build up to what is going to be a dramatic encounter, especially because they are two polar opposites outside the ring, like their dads, not as good as their dads, but like their dads, very similar in temperament to their dads, or, the peculiarities or the sort of the different ways they go about things. Connor's very much heart on sleeve, like Nigel was, and Junior is a very sort of intelligent and different sort of. He's been brought up differently. He's a different kettle of fish. Some like him, some don't. I think he's a great guy. I like them both actually, and I want them both to fight because ultimately fighters need to get these big career bouts on, make their money, and get out healthy. Give us entertainment and get out healthy. Who wants to see Eubank going down another route? Really? Who wants to see Conor? Maybe. But it'll just, the fight will fade. Will it still be there? Of course it will still be there, like Khan and Brook was. But did it come too late for that? Amir wasn't there, was he? And it was a shame. So I'd like to see it soon. I think it will happen soon, from what I'm hearing. I think it will happen probably in the spring. But if it doesn't, there's still always time to make it. And it can stew in the pot a bit longer. I just think there's not that many massive all British fights that can be made at the moment. Dalton Smith, Adam Nazeem's a bit off, but you look at Fury and Joshua, that's got to be made. But if you make Eubank and Benn as well, at the same time in the same year, we're going to really get a big boxing audience from the casuals again. So yeah, I think this is the time to make it. I think it will happen. But if it doesn't happen, I think it can still happen at a later date. But I think timing is so crucial in boxing. And I think this is the time for both of them. So there's a couple of people that just need to calm everyone down and get it done.
Absolutely. Adam, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for giving me almost an hour of your time on this Friday evening. And I look forward to catching up with you, hopefully before New Year's, and we can get all your reaction to Usyk versus Fury too.
No problem. Anytime.
Perfect. Cheers, Adam.